Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you have been watching House of the Dragon, you might notice that the Targaryens love to ride their dragons, not only into battle but just in a genuine sense of enjoyment that can see them take to the sky at any time they please. Need to clear your head? Take a ride on your dragon. The bond between a Targaryen and their dragon is incredibly strong, and as we know, they used their dragons to not only seize control of the Seven Kingdoms, but maintain it for close to 300 years. From reading The Dance of the Dragons and watching House of the Dragon, the TV show, I've noticed something odd. I've noticed that King Aegon Targaryen never rides his dragon Sunfyre at all. In all of Season 1, there's literally no more than 20 seconds of footage of Sunfyre, 17 seconds to be exact. And there's no up-close shots of the dragon either. We don't get to see Aegon even embracing Sunfyre or visiting him, so that left me asking the question, why doesn't Aegon ride his dragon? Well, I've worked out a number of reasons as to why that is, so let's take a look. Aegon is a rather lazy king. He's uninterested in many of his responsibilities, and that includes his duties as king. He's not exactly the most disciplined individual either, as he relies on his small council and hand to deal with the important political matters at hand. That lack of discipline applies to his attitude towards riding Sunfyre. It takes a lot of focus and effort to carefully ride a dragon, something Aegon just doesn't seem to want to do. He just wants the appearance of having a dragon as it complements his kingship and it makes him appear powerful, but that doesn't mean he wants to ride him around King's Landing all the time, or even occasionally do that. In addition to that, it's also very physically demanding to ride a dragon. Believe it or not, it takes a lot of strength to actually just hold on. We've seen this in Game of Thrones when Jon Snow is riding Rhaegal. Sunfyre is also a very quick and agile dragon. He makes sharp turns and he creates a lot of velocity while flying, which could prove to be a bit too daunting for Aegon from previous flights with his dragon. Aegon also appears as if he doesn't need to perfect something. Once he does it, that's kind of it. He gets bored easily, and flying his dragon is no different. He doesn't really seem like someone who forms any sort of emotional bonds either. He literally lives for himself, which reflects in his attachment or connection to Sunfyre directly. As I mentioned, he's not seen visiting Sunfyre or devoting any of his time to him. He just views his dragon as a weapon to use at his disposal whenever he sees fit. Still, Sunfyre is very loyal to Aegon, as all dragons are to their rider. He probably relishes taking to the sky with Aegon, even if it happens very little. Dragons also like their freedom too, so Sunfyre gets to fly around at his own will. And if we look at Aegon's lifestyle in general, he just seems to enjoy the luxury of being king. He'd rather spend his time bedding multiple women. He had a pleasure for taking women's maidenhoods actually, and yeah, he just wanted to do whatever he wanted to do. He is also a borderline alcoholic, and he spends most of his time drunk, and overall he's a rather weak king. He's heavily influenced by his advisors, especially his hand, Otto Hightower, and what's more concerning is, he never seems to go with his gut on anything. He doesn't really know how to be a king. He has absolutely no idea what he's doing, which is why he relies so heavily upon the advice he's given. And this applies to the danger of riding his dragon. If Aegon decided he wanted to go for a ride purely for leisure, you can imagine Otto Hightower in his ear advising against it due to the dangers it poses if he lost control or fell, highlighting further that the king's safety is the utmost priority and needless dragon flight is just too much of a risk. So if we compare that in contrast to his brother Aemond, one of the greatest dragon riders of the realm, one who embraces every single aspect of what it means to have a bond with one's dragon, it further highlights the lack of interest from Aegon's perspective. For all of Aemon's demonstrated strengths, only places more light on his brother's weaknesses. Aemon knows within himself he would make a better king. He has all the traits required to lead the 7 kingdoms. This also means that he would not need to heed to anyone else's advice, something I don't believe Otto Hightower would enjoy. Aemon's approach to his relationship with Vhagar is what Aegon's should be to Sunfyre, but it just hasn't seemed to be the case. When Aegon finally does take to the sky with Sunfyre, his lack of experience ends up costing him greatly. Both he on Sunfyre and Aemon on Vhagar struggled to defeat Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was, on her dragon Meleys. Although successful in defeating her, eventually, Aegon's armour melted to his arm from Meleys' dragonfire, in addition to suffering a broken hip, broken ribs, and ended up with a large majority of his body being severely burned. He was bedridden for an entire year, and consumed so much milk of the poppy that it affected his mind quite negatively, which resulted in Aemon acting as Prince Regent for the year. Aegon's little interest in his relationship with his dragon, as I said, ended up costing him greatly in the long run. His lack of practice and failure to use his dragon to its full potential resulted in him losing a lot of himself in the process. He really was never the same person again. Sunfyre actually ended up succumbing to his wounds and dying on Dragonstone. Aegon wept over his dragon's death, which highlights that he did have some form of attachment to him, but he let his own selfish desires and behaviours overwhelm the many opportunities he had to bond with him. He even tried, unsuccessfully, to make up for the many dragons' deaths during the dance by attempting to hatch more eggs. And if you want to discover why no more dragon eggs would hatch and why the dragons completely died out of existence, then you can check out my video on that topic by clicking the card on screen.